Hello, hello, hello. It is Anne, and you are watching Art on the Creek. What a fun way to kick off our Saturdays in 2023. Let's review the Derwent Inktense products. Now, I don't have their paint pans. I just have the blocks and the pencils. So that's what we're going to review today. And as you can see, this tin no longer houses my pencils. It's where I store my watercolor. I moved my pencils over to this little rolly bag, which for me was a little more convenient. And the color range is just so great. They have the same color range in both products. Let's go check them out and see what they can do. I want to start by swatching out the pencils. I'm using 100% cotton cold press paper, and we're going to zip through this pretty quickly here. But I want you to see how vibrantly the color goes down. They're very easy to blend. They do go down. It's a good soft core lead, very intense. You don't have to do a lot of layers. But when you get it wet, even though the color is intense, there is a bit of a color shift when it's dry, and you may need to go back in and do a second layer. Now, what they say on their website is that the color becomes permanent when it's dry, that it doesn't wash out like watercolor, and you can layer up intense, vibrant colors. I agree with part of that statement. I have not found these to be permanent when they're dry. It's not like using acrylic. You will get some shifting on your layers that are below the layer that you're working on. If you go in with a second glaze, just be aware of that. But they do act a little bit differently than watercolors. They really do stain. They're a lot more vibrant. They feel just like a colored pencil when you're using them. They're very soft. They don't crumble like a Prismacolor, but they really do feel buttery and soft like Prismacolors. They call it an ink-like stain is how the color dries. But, we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit here. I want you to see this very last swatch. That is the bonus pencil that you get with the set of 72. It is an outliner, and it's kind of like a graphite pencil, but not quite. And what it does is it allows you to do just that, to outline. And it's supposed to not be disturbed by water, but you can see on that swatch it kind of was. So that for the most part, nothing's ever 100% guaranteed, but don't let those things sway you away from this product. It is a really fun product to have in your art supply arsenal, and I do recommend them. There's a learning curve with them because they don't quite act like watercolor. So what I'm going to do here is use that outliner pencil just to sketch a couple of mushrooms here, and we're going to compare. We'll do pencils on the left and blocks on the right. Now, just like most Derwent pencils, this one is a little meatier, a little more substantial. I measured it, and it turns out my eyeballing is more accurate than I thought. It is 8 millimeters wide, the pencil itself, and then the core is 4 millimeters, and that's in fact what they say on their website. So, yay for old eyeballs. The blocks also measure 4 millimeters. They're a rectangle, kind of a bar shape, and their length is 7 centimeters. So I don't know quantitatively if that is more or a better buy than if you're getting the pencils. Let me just take a look at their pricing here on their website. Now, this is their retail pricing. You should not have to pay this much, but if you're getting the set that I have, the Inktense pencils in the set of 72 in the tin, that retails for $245. The set of 36 for $123. This set of 24 retails for $82, and the set of 12 retails for $41. And those are all in United States currency. If you're dealing with the blocks, the set of 72 will be a little bit less. It retails for $241, the set of 36 for $135, set of 24 for $90, and a set of 12 for $45. Now, the plus side of all of these, let me jump over to Blick Art Materials. They're such a great one to compare from because they often hold really good prices and they have decent sales. So I just kind of use them as my go-to to compare prices. I know in the UK there's Jackson's Art Supplies. I would say they're pretty comparable. They have a lot of house brands and they carry a very broad selection. There's many websites to choose from. No one sponsors me, and I want to mention too that I paid for these on my own. These are from my own art supplies. Derwent is not sponsoring me either for this video. I'm just sharing my opinion with you. Derwent Inktense pencils also are sold individually, and they run $2.03 a piece. And the Inktense blocks will run you $2.27 a piece, so a little bit more. And that is pretty standard with the pricing of the tins. The range, the set of 72 on Blick Art Materials will set you back $114.98. And the pencils run right around $100. I think it was $100.98, 99 cents, sorry. So here I am painting the mushroom on the right first, and I'm using the blocks for this. And you saw there I picked up the block, and you can use it just like a watercolor paint pan. In fact, if you do plan on using these as regular watercolors, I highly recommend either just going ahead and getting the Derwent Inktense watercolors in the paint pan set, or you can get these blocks, because you do have more versatility if you get the box. But if you get the blocks and then break the sticks, get yourself an empty palette with full pans or half pans and put the broken sticks in there and use it that way. The packaging on these will suffice to ship it to your home correctly and without breaking. But what you can expect also is that inner plastic lining is very flimsy. You have to lift that plastic out to get at the colors that are on the bottom, the remaining half of the colors. They're packaged, the blocks are packaged with a black foam that's really thick, so it does keep them in place, and nothing arrived broken. But the plastic that they're sitting in is really flimsy. Now, they do give you, I think, 12 mixing wells to use right there in the packaging, but I just don't, I didn't like them. They didn't feel right. They're gray, for one thing. It's a dark gray. You can kind of see that here in a little bit of this footage, which is weird. It's much easier to mix colors on something white. So, but the cool thing about these two, if you want to get both of them like I have, the colors do match one for one. And the versatility that you're going to get is that you can use them in a little bit different way. So with these blocks, I'm demonstrating a way here to use them like watercolors. You can also draw with them. You can lay them flat. You can make big, bold lines. The thing with these blocks is if you're going to color with them, blending the pigment deposit out with water is just going to be a little bit more challenging. Now, that's not a negative. It's just that I think that, in my guess, is that it deposits so much more pigment that it just makes it a little bit more challenging to blend. Now, you may have used these and you may not have found that to be true in your experience, which is great. It literally, it could be me. I'm fully willing to admit that it could be user error. However, I enjoy using the blocks as a watercolor. Now, the cool thing about these too is since you can use them on so many different surfaces, that they really give you a huge amount of flexibility. If you were to get one of those, just a plain white canvas bag, you could decorate that with these, and it'll be a lot more durable. Instead of a ground, you'll use a textile medium. These act a little differently than watercolor, and they're not going to just absorb into the cotton. If you're using quilt squares, if you're making a project for a family gift, or working with young students in a classroom, students of any age for that matter, you can give each person, let's say a 12-inch square of cotton muslin fabric, and they can paint with these Inktense. And then all you have to do is set it with an iron, and that will give a really lasting memory to whatever it is you're crafting. And, you know, these are just so versatile. They're so much fun to use. You know, I can only show you the way that I like using them because I haven't really experimented a whole lot with these. I'm looking on the Derwent website about all of the different ways that you can use these things. And oh my goodness, the possibilities are endless. I'm not kidding. It's really fascinating. When these are applied to textiles and to use that as your medium for your art form, you know, you can come up with some really amazing stained glass watercolor looking effects with this. And then of course, if you quilt around it or add some other textural media to that, you know, you can really open up some new possibilities for you in your art and just really let yourself go and be very creative. Now, from my perspective, the way that I enjoy coloring with these, if I'm using the pencils, is to kind of use the same principle as you would with watercolor, where you deposit the pigment in one place and then pull it out with water. That's still easily accomplished here. I've just deposited that pigment down, and now I'm going in with that Taklon brush and pulling that pigment around. If I haven't mentioned it already, I do prefer using a Taklon brush with these simply because they don't hold as much water. And just like with the Neocolor 2s, you know, it's easier to control and move this pigment around if you don't have too much water on your brush. That's my opinion. If you are one to use a natural hair brush with these and you find great success, then please continue to do so. I feel like if you have a water brush, this might be the time to use it. I'm still not a huge fan. I'm not 100% sold on water brushes, but in place of those, I really do like using these Taklon brushes, the nylon brushes. And you can see here with after that first layer, the one on the left is not quite as vibrant, so you're just not getting that rich pigment deposit, which makes perfect sense because on the one on the right, the block, you're using just pure pigment, and I've gotten it wet and right from the block. And now I'm going in with a pencil and then spreading that down. So I just don't have the same amount of pencil deposit on there. And what I'm doing is just trying to match that, make sure I had the same color pencil. And I did. It's the Sicilian yellow. And I'm just going to go in and deposit that kind of the same place that I put the concentration of the watercolor down, just as I did at the one when on the right there when I was using the Inktense block. Now I put the pencils on dry, and for the most part that's how I did this one. I do go in and do a little bit of dry on wet so you can see the different kind of effect that you can get. In fact, let's cut ahead to that here. You can see what I'm doing with this, the brown shade that I put on there is I'm putting the wet brush directly on the tip of the pencil. Now when you do this, just fair warning, you will have splatters, so hold it away from your artwork a little bit. But you can see you can just apply that down, and then here we go. I'm doing the pencil on the wet surface, and you can see your lines come out a lot more bold, a lot more intentional. And now I'll go in and try and blend those out, and if you'll notice, the pencil lines don't loosen up as much. They stay put. So that is something to know, that when you're using the pencils, if you go in dry on wet with the pencil on a wet surface, it does make it a little more challenging to completely blur out those pencil lines if that's the effect that you're going for. Now I apologize that some of this is out of frame. This was just kind of a filming day from you know where, so we'll just bear with me, and I do apologize. But I'm going in with a Payne's Gray pencil now and just kind of doing the same effect. It's still a little bit wet, so I wanted to play around with that look of that dry pencil on the wet surface. On the stem of the mushroom there, just up under the cap, I really like the way that shadow was so bold and crisp. And again, that is by putting the pencil down on the wet surface. So just blending this a little bit more, and in just a second here, I think I'll scooch it up. I'm sorry that I had this down too low and out of frame for much of this drawing, but you can, there we go. Now you can see how I did the ground around the bottom, and here I didn't make an effort to blend out the pencil lines. You can also leave them as a textural element into your art. And that is just another versatile way to use this product. I've just had so much fun with these. I'm going to go ahead and punch up the shadow a little bit on this mushroom on the right with some of that Payne's Gray so that it matches the one on the left a little bit better. There is a little bit of a color shift when these dry, just like with conventional watercolors. In fact, there's enough of a color shift here that I was motivated to put in another coat of red over on the left mushroom with pencil. And the way that you do the glaze is just simply the way that you would you did it in the first round. Was we just colored down with the colored pencil, dry on dry, and now we're coming in with a wet brush to pull that pigment out and blend it. For all intents and purposes, this really is just like using a regular watercolor or a regular watercolor pencil. The thing you're going to notice that's different is that the colors are more vibrant, and they do tend to stain. They're harder to lift. So if your way of putting in a highlight is to lift it out, beware that might be a struggle with these. You might want to go ahead and intentionally leave space, use some Frisket or some masking fluid, and go from there. Or you can certainly come in with a bleed-proof white on top of these and put the highlights in like that, or with a white gel pen or something. This method that I'm using here, I put the pencil down in the palette and then just kind of agitated it with a wet brush so that I could use the pencil like a traditional watercolor. And that is a technique you can use on just about any water-soluble pencil. It works really well. And just depositing just a touch more pigment there on the left and then pulling it out. Now I am just about finished with this. I'm just kind of getting to that point where I tend to fiddle a little too much, which is just the way I paint. So, you know, here we are. But I'm almost done with this. There we go. And now you're going to be able to see the direct comparison side by side of what these look like together. They really don't have too many differences. Here's kind of a close-up of the blocks, And you can see with that, the blending there, it looks more like a traditional watercolor. You can really move the paint around. Now this is hot press, so of course it's going to act a little bit differently than cold press, but moving the paint around with the blocks, no problem. It's just going to act exactly like watercolor with the exception of that staining factor. Now when we compare this to the one on the left with the pencils, you can see those the blending on the top of the mushroom, the cap, that just worked so beautifully, so seamlessly. In fact, I like it a little better than the one on the right. But these pencil lines that I achieved on the ground there and going on the stem of the mushroom, they kind of just give it a little more texture. And I think that's just something to be aware of, that if you're using the pencils on a wet surface, you're going to get more texture. That would be a great thing to do with rocks. It would be good to do with trees, leaves. There's a lot of things that you could use that texture for to your advantage. With these two little mushrooms today, just these quick little cartoony doodles, we were able to determine the similarities and differences between using the Derwent Inktense blocks and the Derwent Inktense pencils. And just know that I've only scratched the surface here. We didn't even go into doing these, working with these on fabric. Or wood or ceramic or any of the other possibilities. Hopefully what this video accomplished for you is to make you curious. I think that as long as we stay curious, that really helps spark our creativity and keeps us from getting into a rut. So this is my opinion on a couple of products that I have and really enjoy, the Derwent Inktense blocks and pencils. And I really appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time. For more content like this, if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing. It's really easy. Just hit that little bell so you'll know whenever I post a new video. On Wednesdays, I'll do crafts. Thursdays and Fridays, we'll do some watercolor featuring scenes around Colorado. And on Saturdays, we'll do lots of reviews like this. Thanks again, you guys. Have a great weekend.